Right, good evening, and thank you for joining us. This is a really important story, and I'm really glad we've got the perfect panelist, the perfect guest to help us understand this story. I told you a little bit about it on the news, yesterday. This is, and just a recap for those of our audience members who didn't catch it in the news, and it's likely you might not have caught it because a lot of the mainstream media sort of sidestepped this story, which we will also talk about. $2.7 billion worth of drugs seized from 2 shipping containers, which is effectively roughly one consignment. Now, in Indian rupees, that's 20,000 crore rupees. I want to give our audience some perspective of what that is, right? 20,000 crore rupees is what the government is spending building its entire Central Vista project. 20,000 crore rupees is what all the Indian money that was parked in Swiss bank accounts in the last 1 year, which is the highest ever. 20,000 crore rupees is all of the money that the government is using to recapitalize PSU banks. This is a huge amount of money. Now, as ordinary citizens, we have trouble sort of wrapping our heads around the amount that we're talking about. But it is a huge, huge amount of money. And we'll also talk about who's going to have to pay for the drugs that are now in custody of the authorities. Now, this was seized out of the Mundra port in Gujarat. What we understand now is that the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence has also recovered 37 kilograms of drugs and cocaine and contraband items in Delhi, Noida, Uttar Pradesh. They're arresting people. 8 people have been arrested, including Afghan and Uzbek nationals, from what we understand. Like I said, biggest drug haul ever. The origin of the drugs are said to be Afghanistan, come in via Iran. We also know that there was a couple that was picked up, a firm registered in Vijayawada that had actually ordered this consignment. It was in their name. But it did seem from newspaper reports that the couple in question didn't really know the size of the contraband that was being moved. They were just a name, just a label, because they were being paid 30,000 rupees per container for a container that was moving 20,000 crore rupees. So it did seem, of course, that they didn't understand the risk that they were taking on. Apparently, they also got 3 lakh rupees in Hawala for custom clearance. There's a suggestion now that that this was not the first consignment to have come into the country, that there has been more larger and more serious consignments of drugs that have come into the country. Now, also, we're understanding that the state of Gujarat is not a consumer of heroin, and certainly not at these quantities. About 3,000 kgs of heroin has come in these 2 containers. So where were the drugs actually going to, and why is India the port of choice at this point? These are all questions that we have to ask. Now, the reason why I'm glad we're having this conversation is because I have with me right now Mr. B.V. Kumar. Mr. B.V. Kumar is a revenue officer. He is a super detective. Someone that a lot of people look up to. He started with the Indian Revenue Service. He was the former Director General of the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence. And he literally, with his own 2 hands, set up the Narcotics Bureau in India as well. So nobody understands this better than he does. And he's been kind enough to give us his time, joins us out of Bangalore this evening. Mr. Kumar, good evening, and thank you for joining us. My first question to you is, when I read the amount, I mean, again, for our audience, put it into perspective. Think of 1 kg of atta, think of 3 kgs of atta. Now think of 3,000 kgs of atta, right, in a bag. That much heroin worth 20,000 crore rupees. Mr. Kumar, did the size of this consignment surprise you when you first read about it?
One of the important things we have to keep note is, this is the first large consignment, almost a world record seizure, which has happened after the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan. Because they took over almost from the 1st of September, where they literally took over the entire Afghanistan. And this is the first major seizure that has happened. But this is not the first seizure. It was preceded earlier in the Gujarat coast, when in July 17, a ship called Henry, 1,500 kilograms of heroin was caught off Gujarat coast. And earlier to that, with a Sri Lankan boat was caught with 310 kilograms. And more than that, 5 AK-47s were found with 1,000 rounds of ammunition. But what is important to note is why they have chosen the sea route of the Gujarat coast particularly. And this is basically what I understand and I could gather is that there's a heightened vigilance on the Indo-Pak border, and that too compounded with the fencing that has been done and increased patrolling to prevent infiltration by the terrorists and other things. So the smuggling organizations have found it's a lot convenient to smuggle through the Gujarat coast. And here, what they have done is to camouflage the origin of the drug. The goods have been shipped to Bandar Abbas, where the goods were in transit. And when any consignment, even in India, when a consignment is in transit, normally, unless there is specific intelligence, it is not thoroughly checked because it's not meant as a destination port, but it's in transit to some other country. And what was declared was talcum, not powder exactly, talcum stones, which are ultimately made into talcum powder or utilized in the manufacture of talcum powder. So here, because of the heightened illness, they have chosen this route. And here it's very difficult because once it is on the sea, unless one has specific intelligence, it's very difficult to check the container ships. Normally, if it is gold smuggling and other things, being of small volume and high value, they are usually smuggled through the Arab dhows and other things. Small fishing boats ultimately will do the landing on the Indian coast. So here, when a container ship comes, it's very difficult unless you have very specific intelligence. Here, what was important to note is the DRI has apprehended only the couple. That is one Mr. Sudhakar and his wife Durga Vaishali. Very surprisingly, they took an import-export code from a person in Chennai called, because they live in Chennai. They live in Chennai, and one Ravi Varman, who runs an organization called OECL Logistics. From him, they took his help and they obtained the IEC code. And with this help, then they have filed the bills of entry and other things. And here, the role of the customs agent is again important. Now, one Amit, who is heading a customs agency in Ahmedabad, has been apprehended, has been arrested by the DRI, and he's also being interrogated. And what is also important is this is not the first consignment. The intelligence gathered indicates that in June of this particular year, 25 tons were brought and landed in the Gujarat coast, same at probably Mundra port. And Rajasthan truck, the number of the truck also is available. It belongs to one J Logistics. And I'll just give the number of the truck also. It's also available. That's RJ01GB8328. That's the number of the truck owned by this J Logistics of Rajasthan. It is registered in Rajasthan. Now, very surprisingly, this truck has not passed through any toll gates. So my own surmise and analysis of this data is that probably the goods are still in Gujarat and probably small quantities are being taken out either to Delhi destination, which has become a very big consumption center, and so also to Bombay, if it's meant for export and other things. Now, as you rightly pointed out, 21,000 crores itself is a huge amount, mind-boggling, and it almost covers some of the loans which the central government has taken from the Reserve Bank of India for covering certain these things. So here, imagine for 25 tons, unless there's a real big financier and a real big international criminal organization which is financing the logistics, I mean, no individual or no company can do this type of landing and other things. That's one part. The more important is the investigation is leading further to show whether this is meant for terrorist financing or for political financing for the coming elections. One never knows, because I know from personal experience in one of my books I recorded that there is one Nardoni bank in Beirut, which was there, which collected Indian rupees in cash, and it was sent to India. And that was utilized at that point of time. When I was posted at that time in Kuwait to gather intelligence in West Asia, North Africa, specific intelligence was received that this Russian bank, which was located in Beirut, collected Indian currency and sent to India to finance elections, to which party I don't name. But then no action was taken. So here, whether it's meant for international trade, for smuggling to other countries like Europe or USA, or whether it's also a part of the amount is meant for financing political parties, which party and other things we don't know at this stage. So there's a wide ramification for the whole racket. That is what I feel at this stage.
Mr. Kumar, you did say, of course, quite shockingly, you say that this is basically what I called the largest consignment that India has ever seized was actually a small fraction of a much larger consignment.
Much larger consignment.
3 tons was actually a small fraction of 25 tons, which is money that is so mind-boggling right now that it could lift a large number of people out of poverty in this country.
Yes.
It's that kind of money we're talking about. Could this have happened at all? And you said no one individual or no one organization could have done it.
Right.
Is it fair to assume that there would have been people in various government organizations that were hand in glove on this in order to allow for something like this to happen? Or could it have been that our customs and our DRIs just missed it?
No, I don't think we have any such information at this stage, whether any government organization involved or any customs people were involved and other things. But one significant fact, which probably is suggestive, is that why should they select a private port instead of a regular customs manned port? This is also customs manned, but it's all said and done, it's a privately managed port. We have industrial security force in all government controlled ports. For example, in Kandla, there's the industrial security force which mans the customs port facilities. So also in Bombay, so also in other places. But in Mundra, probably they have their own security organization. So why did they choose Mundra instead of selecting Kandla, for example, or for that matter, any other port in Bombay or any other place, if it is a real legitimate consignment? And as you rightly pointed out, these 2 persons, Sudhakar and his wife Durga Vaishali, are not people of that type of means who could finance this type of thing, and only probably they were used as a front person to sign the Bill 70 documents and import documents. Now, Vaishali's mother's residence in Vijayawada was used as the address of the trading company called Ashi, a trading company. Now, see the location of the people are in Chennai. The IEC code is applied, obtained in Chennai from OECL Logistics, and the customer's agent is in Ahmedabad, and the landing takes place in Mundra. If I'm in Vijayawada, if the nearest port for me is probably Vizag, why should I not import at Vizag if it is meant for legitimate use and other things? So this itself is suggestive that the whole thing has been so well planned that it is very suggestive that it was very highly planned. Yes.
If I may, so I just want to read out the statement that the Adani Group has put out officially on its Twitter handle, Adani Online. It has said, and I quote, "The law empowers Government of India's competent authorities such as Customs and DRI to open, examine and seize unlawful cargo. No port operator across the country can examine a container. Their role is limited to running the port. We sincerely hope this statement will put to rest motivated, malicious and false propaganda about Adani Group." So effectively what they're saying is that it is not, as a port operator, we cannot check consignments, so you cannot in any way blame this on us. But if you would just explain to us what you mean as to why you find it interesting that these drug cartel is a fair word to use at this point, given the size we're talking about. Why did they use a private port instead of the government ports? What is the difference between the two? If the customs and the DRI is the same in both, what's the difference between the two?
No, so what the press report released by the Adani Group is correct. Normally, the port trust of any port, as a government port or privately manned port, they are only the custodians of the cargo. Only when a cargo is abandoned, then the port trust concerned, they can open and auction the goods and other things. Otherwise, they are purely as a trustee and as a custodian, they hold the goods, and it's for the customs authorities. Once the import documents are filed, they'll open and examine and do the next part of the procedure, namely collection of duty and then clearance and other things, if nothing is wrong. So to that extent, their statement is factually correct. To that extent.
And ahead of that, sir?
Well, there are other interesting features also, because now Afghanistan is now hard pressed for revenue. Now,
Yes.
the what you call the equivalent of the Reserve Bank of India, the Central Bank of Pakistan, Afghanistan, their funds are kept in the Federal Reserve of the US. which has been frozen. And so also, I think that some of the countries have imposed sanctions, and so are absolutely short of any funds for even essentials, including probably for finding out their essential imports towards medicines or food grains and things like that. So now they're compelled to sort of use the drug-generated money. Now, 83% of the world production of opium is in Afghanistan. And from that, now India also has become a big consumer. 6% of the world production of drugs is consumed in India. Can you believe in a place like Delhi, now heroin is being sold at a price of 4 crores per kilogram, which was never there. It used to be 30,000 rupees, 40,000 rupees in Afghanistan. It used to come to Bombay. It used to become a lakh of rupees. Then it used to go to USA, where at the retail level, it used to be $2 million. Now, all that appears to be peanuts compared to the present day prices. That itself, the price itself shows in Delhi, or for that matter, any Indian station where drugs are being consumed, that its demand is now growing beyond what you call manageable levels. So probably we have to sit up and see how this menace can be tackled.
Do you expect, now that the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan, and you said quite rightly, most international organizations have cut off their access to international aid and to the dollar revenue that they had, or the dollar reserves that they had with the previous government, they are now hard pressed for cash. Do you expect that a lot of this is going to become more prominent, that there will be more drugs moving, via the oceans right now, and India will have to be more vigilant?
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Earlier, the money that was generated in Afghanistan, according to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, was anywhere from $1.2 billion to $2.1 billion. That was the normal revenue that they were generating, even when Taliban was partly occupying Afghanistan. So that was the type of money that was generated in drugs. But now, with full occupation and other things, and with this sanctions imposed on Afghanistan, unfortunately, they'll be more and more dependent upon this particular thing. The other important factor which we have to take into account is the Pakistan's role. Now, Pakistan itself has 100 billion rupees worth of drug production in Pakistan, out of which at least $1 billion worth of heroin is smuggled into India or through India to other ports. So now Pakistan itself is in very dire economic straits. They don't have that type of money to manage their own economy. And they'll probably assist probably Taliban-run government to depend heavily upon the money that is generated in drugs. So this factor has to be kept in mind by the government and the agencies concerned.
Mr. Kumar, tell me something. How would this investigation now move forward? Let's assume if you were in charge at this point, this consignment has now been seized. It's a trail of 20,000 crore rupees that someone is short of at this point. Someone has paid this money and not received delivery of the consignment. How would you trace this? How do you think this investigation is going to move forward? What are they going to be looking for?
Now, right now, they have arrested about 8 Indians, 4 Afghan nationals, 1 Uzbekistan national, and the other 2 persons I mentioned were the customs agent as well as this Ravi Varman, who was in the import-export code. But then these are all only facilitators. To the extent their important document that was required to handle an import consignment, to that extent, their role is very, very limited. As you rightly pointed out in your introductory remarks, these 2 husband and wife combination have lent their names purely for a petty amount, least realizing to what extent this whole thing would lead to. And right now they are in 14 days custody in Bhuj jail. And that's what I gathered latest. So probably what is required to be found out is to find out the trail. It's not very difficult. Once we know the Rajasthan truck's number and the registration, it's not very difficult to find out who has hired them. Probably the same truck would have been hired even this time, or that particular agency, Jai Logistics, would have been hired this time also if it was not detected by the DRA. So they will be a good lead to start with. And from them, they can find out who are the persons who has engaged them. Normally, they have a hierarchy because the person who is handling the transport and logistics will not know except the person who has hired him to hire the logistics. The next higher person will know only so to go. They become the real person becomes very remote. It is the secrecy which is very important, and these organizations work on secrecy. But then the quantity that's involved is mind-boggling, and then sooner or later the things will come out when the internal what you call failure is discussed amongst the organizations themselves as to how this whole thing leaked out, who is responsible, and then the fight emerges, and sooner or later their internal fight itself will reveal the names and other things. So, and if the government announces some big reward to the information which leads to the apprehending of the main culprits, definitely the informers will come forward.
Mr. Kumar, you said yourself that it is possible that because of the size of the consignment we're talking about, because of the money that we're talking about, that it could have been, hypothetically speaking, money that was actually intended to fund elections. In that case,
I didn't say that. Maybe.
Maybe it could be. Maybe
it could be.
It might. Given the size, it does seem like something that an individual might not be able to do. In that case, do you expect a free and fair investigation?
Yeah, why not? The DRI is very independent, and it was always independent, and it was never influenced by any politicians. Even the politicians are scared of the DRI. So in this sense, the independence of the organization has been maintained throughout, till now at least, and we had good people to head the organization, and I'm very sure they'll maintain their independence and find out the real truth. So I'm very confident about that, because the organization has built up reputation over a period of number of years. It's not just a one day's affair. And I'm very confident they'll be able to find out the truth. But one more thing we had to probably keep in mind is that this investigation should start not only for this particular consignment, but they should go back to the past consignments. And that will really give us the leads. And they'll be able to identify the people who handle the logistics. And from them, when you go back, then you'll be able to find the people behind from stage to stage. If that is done, I'm very sure they'll be able to find out. With the loss involved is tremendous for even the suppliers. So they will not keep quiet. They will also try to find out who is involved and other things. In gold smuggling, it was small affair, but the smugglers would write off if the consignment was seized. But if a person tells a lie saying that, look, you have given me, say, 10,000 chulas, out of which 5,000 has been seized by the DRI, or 10,000 was seized, but only when the DRI seizes only 5,000, then that fellow is killed. So they cannot conceal the truth from the major syndicates. Sooner or later it will come out, and they will be having a lot of repercussions. So ultimately the truth will come out.
Well, Mr. Kumar, this now sounds like a Netflix special. So effectively you're saying that somebody in the cartel, in the chain of custody, while moving this or smuggling these drugs, has messed up. As a result, the DRI has now seized $2.7 billion worth of contraband. Yes. So there will be somebody, some boss is going to get really upset. And you are saying there will be a trail of crime that will now play out because of this loss. But I mean, they're not going to be able to recover this since it's in custody of the agencies at this point. But you are saying there will be a trail of crime that will offer the agencies clues as to who these people are.
I'm sure it will come out. And within the organizational people will come out, because somebody will be victimized by the higher ups in the hierarchy of the organization, and he will be taken to task, and he'll be on the run, and probably he'll come forward and tell, look, these are the persons involved. At least the next higher ups will be able to reveal. So
I do want to ask you this. The last time you and I spoke, incidentally, was when the Rhea Chakraborty case was on. At that point, it was a question of a little over 56 grams of marijuana. It was a very small, almost a recreational self-use amount of drugs, but the entire Indian media was up in arms about it. The Narcotics Bureau had put its best people on this job. It was, incidentally, the most exciting case in the country. But here we have 21,000 crore rupees and not a peep out of the media. It seems to be quietly sidestepping this story. Have you seen anything like this in the past? Do you have any
Never.
clues as to why this may be?
No. On the contrary, when I was there, when the largest seizure at that point in time was 703 kilograms of heroin, fairly 65% purity, and about 4 or 5 tons of hashish and 4 or 5 tons of mandrax. Huge amount of publicity came. The DA representative in Delhi, he came running to find out whether it's a real truth or something else. And wide publicity came throughout the world. So I'm very sure this also will receive wide publicity throughout the world. But in India, somehow the media is mute, except 1 or 2 channels. Yeah, yours is probably the second channel where this is being discussed. The first channel was probably CNN, IBN, and yours is second. The others probably are busy covering some other political events.
Do you think that this could be suppressed because there are important people involved, or do you just think that the media is distracted?
No, media is now busy with other developments. For example, the Prime Minister's visit to United States, which is also a very important event from the country's point of view, because it involves obtaining major investment in India. Plus, probably we need defense equipment to equip our forces and other things. So that's also a very important visit. And that is also receiving wide coverage. And it also is important from another point of view, that somehow we have to contain China's expansionism, because China at the moment is influencing Afghanistan through Pakistan or directly. And they are ready to finance and provide all the means to keep the Afghanistan government in place. So
Mr. Kumar, what is the likelihood that this money, the drugs, were being moved to finance terror?
Yes, you're very correct. See, terrorism requires a huge amount of funding. I'll give you some figures. It is not today's figures. It is 1991 figures. At that point of time, some of our persons who were caught in Jammu and Kashmir, they were interrogated. And then the data is very, very revealing. For example, if you want a militant leader to be financed, and these figures are per month. If a militant leader has to be financed, it ranged between 15 lakhs to 3 crores per month. If it is an Afghan Mujahid, it ranged from 40 lakhs to 20 crores per month. And if it's a new recruit, it is as low as 2,500 or 15,000. And maximum was 30.75 lakhs. 3 crores 75 lakhs maximum. And the new recruit means probably in the hierarchy slightly higher level. So the total monthly expenditure in 1991 for financing terrorism was 26 crores 75 lakhs. So imagine today how much it will be. So it's a huge thing, and this type of funds can only be generated only from drug generated money. See, drug trafficking and terrorism are highly intrinsically connected. And it's an accepted fact, well documented and discussed throughout the world. And this has to be kept in mind. So we have to be, you have to take this case very seriously to find out how much this money is going towards financing of terrorism. The other aspect also we have to keep in mind, the same organizations which are smuggling drugs are also smuggling fake currency into the country to undermine our economy. So that also we have to keep in mind. Then the area, Afghan-Pakistan area, is also rich in this nuclear minerals. So that also may be smuggled through these routes and other things. I've seen every inch of the Gujarat coast and Maharashtra coast. For example, our presence in terms of the customs organization is far and few between. We have 1,663 kilometers of coastline and 41 minor ports. We are well equipped in terms of communication. We have high frequency and very high frequency communication sets. We can speak to 200 miles, 300 miles from the shore to the ships and other things. All that is well equipped, but human potential is very low. Similarly, Coast Guard presence is there in Porbandar and Jamnagar. Probably we had to equip them and with more stations to guard our keys, both for preventing smuggling as well as preventing infiltration. It's very important. And we must also allow DRI to, and also the national what is that called? National NTRO, national something expansion is there, organization also to concentrate on gathering intelligence about the functioning of these criminal organizations. So DRI also needs to be equipped in terms of technologically. They're already technologically well equipped, but further it may be necessary in terms of probably profiling of the organizations. For example, in this particular case, you have seen the company is registered in Vijayawada. The persons are residing in Chennai. The landing, the customer's agent is in Ahmedabad. Landing takes place in Mundra. The moment this type of multi-location, what you call organization is there to import any consignment or export any consignment, it should immediately, they should be profiled and studied. And that is one method of identifying whether any particular organization is involved or working under guidance of some international organization. And the other danger which is coming to my mind is there's one Mexico, in Mexico, there's one organization called Sinaloa, which almost supplies the entire requirement of the American heroin market. Now, if they align with Taliban to further augment the supplies of Sinaloa, then probably there will be a business understanding. I don't think they would like to become business rivals. Probably they would like to franchise Afghanistan's Taliban for supplying heroin and other things. And if they send it to Europe, they get double the money compared to the American market.
Mr. Kumar, I want to thank you, though, for giving us your time and helping us understand. This is obviously not the last we are going to hear of this. We're going to keep a close eye on this entire movement, because there seems to be something very big happening, off our coast, and something that we should pay attention to from a terror point of view, from a black money point of view, from a drug smuggling point of view, from a law and order point of view, maybe even from an elections point of view. All of this, this size of money could topple an economy. We're talking about a very, very large amount of money. Mr. Kumar, thank you for
one last word I wanted to mention.
Yes, please.
This type of organization, if we want to control, not by seizure of drugs and other things, but the wealth that is generated has to be seized and forfeited. Then only we can control the drug smuggling and other things. That's a very important thing. Financial investigation into this type of activity is very important to neutralize the drug smuggling syndicates. Thank you. Thank you for...
Thank you. And I do hope we can keep talking about this every time there is an update. Of course, we're not exactly attributing motive to why the rest of the media is sidestepping the story.
No, not at all.
Huge story, but we will continue to pay attention to it, and we'll continue to bring insight to our audience. That's the job as far as I'm concerned. So I thank Mr. Kumar for giving us his time and explaining what is happening in this particular story. Remember, the news is up in a bit. Amita's reading the news today. It's just the news. There's no opinion, there's no debate, there's no shouting. So you can take a look at the news. It's all of the information that you need for today. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Good night. Thanks.